On today's episode of Curve Ahead, I am joined by Julia, the co founder and CEO of Wayo, a startup that's revolutionizing how companies source custom merchandise. As a Forbes 30 Under 30 nominee in the manufacturing sector, Julia brings valuable insights from her experience as the former chief of staff at Alibaba North America. In our conversation, Julia breaks down how Wayo is disrupting the promotional product industry by connecting businesses directly with overseas factories, cutting out middlemen and delivering high quality custom merchandise at up to 50% cost savings. She shares her fascinating journey of spending a year overseas visiting hundreds of factories to build their supply chain infrastructure. We also discuss the challenges of finding product market fit as a startup founder, with Julia revealing how narrowing their focus to serve tech companies and startups proved critical for their growth strategy. In this episode, you'll gain practical wisdom about navigating the founder's journey, from prioritizing your time across competing demands to knowing when to delegate tasks that aren't in your zone of genius, and using AI to transform traditional industries. Let's dive in. On today's episode of Curve Ahead, I am joined by Julia, the co-founder and CEO of Wayo. Julia, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, so great to meet everyone. So I started Wayo to essentially connect businesses with factories directly to make much cooler swag and merch directly at a 50% savings, factory direct pricings. So my background, previously I used to be chief of staff at Alibaba in North America, and that's where I kind of got more exposure into the whole global supply chain space and found that there's a huge pain point and also opportunity where, just generally connecting with global factories is a lot of hassle. It's not transparent. It's not automated, but there's some of the best factories out there that can make the best items. So we're thinking, how can we bridge the gap and actually still give you the Amazon kind of checkout experience, but the Alibaba kind of pricing and variety? And that's what we're building with Wayo, empowered by a lot of AI tech. Actually, this year, we're working on building quite a lot of different tech solutions to make the whole process so much simpler with AI agents and designs, all that. So yeah, very excited to be here and talk a little bit more about, this whole startup journey and experience.
I love that. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Wayo is relatively younger as a brand, and you guys are just now coming to market.
Yes, so we just officially launched earlier this year, and we're just, trying to figure out the go to market actually this month.
It's exciting, isn't it? Or is it also very nerve-wracking?
I would say a little bit of both. The past 2 years, so I had the idea of probably building Wayo even like 3 years ago. 2 years ago is when I, had my co-founders join on board. We went to market and started raising money, got backed by venture, and then started scaling the team. First year was like, just me literally overseas for over a year, visiting hundreds of factories, building out the whole infrastructure of supply chain. And then we spent pretty much another year essentially digitizing the products and building all the tech products that now you see on our website. So we have full design studio, auto quote, realistic preview, self-checkout, all that available. And now, this year is a different challenge. Every year is like, 0 to 1 trying to figure something out. And this year is like, how do we actually help the people that actually need our service and get in front of them? So everyone can know that Wayo could be your go-to place for making merch. And right now, I would say we help a lot of tech companies and startups and founders, just because actually I think the value prop aligns a lot. For founders, they want something that's like easy because they don't have time, and also they want it to be affordable because something with swag, when the ROI is not so clear when you're early stage, you don't want to be breaking your bank. So another thing is what we realize is tech companies go to conferences and really like giving away conference swag, and people want stuff that's more unique, interesting. But since you're giving away, you also want that to be affordable. So we kind of found our product market fit there, and we're kind of double downing on that this year.
So, of the building out the infrastructure, the digitization, and now like go to market, check out, making sure that you're in front of the right audience, the right customer base, like which one of those three has been the absolute most brutal thing to go through on starting out the organization?
I think even figuring out who we should really target at the beginning, that took quite a while, because I think it's also very normal for startups initially starting. You feel like you can serve everyone, right? Like I'm like, oh, we can make merch for companies, brands, creators, whatever. Like, but the problem is when you go too broad, you don't have focus, and that's really hard to really like get to scale. So I think it took us a while trying to figure out like which segment really to double down, what really makes sense. And then from there, it's like really just like, self teaching myself, like in terms of like how to actually build a sales funnel. Like everything's new to us. And it's not like we have infinite resource and a bunch of like really experienced salespeople on a team. It's initially just me and my co-founder trying to figure out the go-to-market. So it did take us some time to figure out the whole process in terms of like what kind of tech stack to use and how to automate and then potentially scale up. So I would say that's probably the hardest part. And now that we kind of found the best strategy and also the best target, it becomes like a lot easier, hopefully over time. And then we can replicate the same model and get it into potentially other segments as we're scaling. Yeah.
You're not alone, right? I've had dozens of these conversations with different founders. Some of them have only been in business for a year and other ones for 40 plus years. And the most common thing that I've heard from all of them is that they didn't really find their success until they really niched down. Like once they went like super specific, figured out exactly who they were talking to, they were able to identify those people more readily and easily replicate their success over and over again. So you're not alone in that struggle.
Yeah. And I think also, looking for partners in a space, like, because there's so many organizations, right, that are the super connectors or they have a community. And, one partnership like that is much more worthwhile than you trying to close all the small clients like one by one. So it's kind of like balancing that. But at the same time, it's like when you have limited resources, where do you focus? How do you time manage? And I mentioned that we go to a lot of conferences. A lot of times the conference take away the whole week and then, trying to catch up. And we're still the founders. We're not just the salespeople, right? We still need to balance everything else going on in a company on the ops, on the product tech side. So I think that is probably, every founder have been through it. You just wear many hats and it's about like how to actually figure out what's the best way to prioritize for the company.
I would agree. I think that conferences are really challenging from the fact that they're just super time consuming, but they're an easy way to be able to get in front of a lot of your potential customers all at the same time. So like it's a balancing game of figuring out, okay, is it really worth me losing a week of otherwise productivity doing something else versus really trying to get more and more resources into the sales funnel. So
Yeah.
it's tough. It's a tough game. I wouldn't say that there's a right way or a wrong way. I think everybody kind of structures their sales cycle differently. And if that's the thing that's working for you, then definitely lean into it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about your recent recognition from Forbes.
Yeah. So I was on a list very fortunately for the 30 under 30 in this year in the manufacturing sector. Yeah, it happened pretty randomly. It is also my last year, so I'm turning 30 this year. So I was like, maybe I saw that there is like nomination open, pinged a couple folks. I'm like, trying to go for it. And then I think there's also some probably just like some people who just like nominating more like voluntarily without me knowing. And then I just got, reached out by them. I think it was like later last year to provide some more information. And I just had no idea. And then I'm like, okay, I guess it's done. And then all of a sudden I got an email, I think it was like last December or something. And they were like, oh, congrats, you're on the list. I'm like, what? I thought there might be like, more I need to do. But apparently, they went through all the vetting already and just like announced it right away. So I was like, that's cool. I would say like, honestly, it's more a label. It doesn't really matter. I think what is really helpful is actually having the community of founders through that, because there's a whole network of 30 on 30 founders. And then we got some of our clients actually through the network because everyone, their needs merged. So that has been really great. And then there was an event actually in Abu Dhabi in March for a bunch of like Forbes women, there's 30 under 30 and 50 over 50. And then I went to that and that was really cool. I met some of really, really great people and friends that would form throughout that whole week. So yeah.
It's interesting to hear your perspective on just kind of how it came together. It seemed like it was kind of a brush off thing, and then all of a sudden it just kind of happened. And I would assume that, at least in my eyes, that's a really impressive feat, right? Like not everybody has the opportunity to be recognized in a globally recognized magazine for being in business and entrepreneurship. So kudos to you, even if it was just kind of like, "Oh, that happened. Okay, cool."
Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, I think it also feels like, I've been doing this for a while now, like, different ventures and been just like hustling. It does definitely feels like, getting recognized. That's a really great feeling. And I think, but this is just a beginning, right? Like we're just starting, we're still very early stage. We're literally just starting go to market. So I think it gives me more encouragement to continue building and create something that's actually valuable, to the world.
Well, that, and then you also have the community, right? The other founders who've been on the list. I think that that kind of gives you a leg up, or like people who haven't been on the list and they see that credential and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'll definitely have a conversation with you about
Yeah.
anything you want."
Yeah, yeah, I think that's helpful, especially like, we do sales, but I'm like very anti the aggressive salesy approach. I feel like it's more about me bringing value to the other person. And if we can, that's great, right? Like it actually can help them, let's say, make cooler merch and save some money. Why not? And that's, I think, where I think having that probably on my LinkedIn is helpful. If I'm doing sales and outreach, people are like, you're not just like a scammy person or a salesperson trying to just purely sell me. And then also through this, I get to meet so many cool people and different kind of founders. And I think, part of that, even going to events and conferences, that's also a really big part is like you connect with other people and see what's out there. And I personally, like, I really enjoy that. And sometimes you're just building in your little, small, little bubble. And I think like that's an opportunity to really broaden out and like see, what's all the different cool things happening in the world.
So what would you suggest for those people who are building in the bubble? Would you suggest kind of, hey, take it to like a build in public type situation where you're engaging with more people on Twitter to at least build an audience on what it is that you're building, build additional awareness, or build a community around what it is that who you are as a brand or what it is that your brand does? Like, what would you suggest to that person who is comfortable in that bubble to get out of it and do something different for them?
Yeah, it's also, a matter of your bandwidth and prioritization, right? Like as much as I would want to do that, realistically right now there's just so many other things that are higher priority that I haven't even gotten to, like content creation or building an audience really. But I know it's something that I would want to do. But I think early stage sometimes you have to stay heads down focused because all this distraction is also distracting you from initially just coming up with the actual product that then you can go sell. So I would say for me, probably the first 2 years, I was literally just heads down, like no like social media posts or anything. It was just like, how do we actually create the product for it to work first? And then this year, early stage, we're trying to figure out go to market strategies. So also just heads down sales, like trying to get the deals closed. And as we kind of scale that up, I think that's where I want to transition myself more into is then we can start talking about like content creation and creating audience and pushing forward. Because now at least, our website is live, like it has all this stuff on there. Whereas I feel like if I was investing my time in there, the ROI won't be that good if we don't even have a, core foundational website that is functional. So I think it's like a balance. It's like you want to make sure, first of all, you have the foundations ready. And then all those kind of like, getting outside of bubble, either it's like networking, going to events or creating content, putting yourself out there. That's all going to amplify what you already done the hard work for.
So you had mentioned, right, that you're a smaller organization with a scrappy team. You're pulled in a lot of different directions. What is that North Star that helps you guide how you spend your time? On how do you prioritize the time on the 100 different directions you're being pulled in any given day?
It's very hard. Sometimes it's like you want everything to be done, right? Like yesterday, and it's just not possible. I think for me, it's like actually figuring out what is like the biggest milestone for, let's say, this quarter, right? Like every quarter could be different. Year ago, the milestone would be let's onboard those factories. Let's figure out how to like, launch the first 100 products or whatever. Or it could have been, we need to build all those tech tools. We need a realistic preview feature. We need the AI agent. So like that will be the biggest milestone for the quarter for the company. And then it's like then prioritizing whatever can get us actually closer to the milestone. Whereas, maybe this month for us, it's like we want to hit metrics now. Like this month is about client acquisitions and getting the numbers like there. So whatever that can help with conversion, whatever can help with like actually getting exposure to more clients, that will probably be more of my priority. So, I mean, that's the fun thing about being a fun founder is like you literally have a different job every month because you might have a different prioritization every month, and then you have to spend your time in different things in order to get there. Like personally, I feel like I do everything from now, sales marketing, but, before it was like supply chain ops and it was recruiting. It was like, I mean, product, even though I don't have a technical background, but like trying to learn how to, project manage and all that. Yeah. So, and then there's a month you were like, fundraising and pitching. And yeah, so it's like I really think like that's probably one of the most enjoyable part for like being an entrepreneur is like it's never ending. You never wake up and just know what's going to happen today. Every day you're doing something different, but it could also be stressful on the other hand. So I would say it's like certain kind of personalities really crave that and certain people probably would hate that. So I think that's another important thing kind of going into the startup world and entrepreneurship is like, figuring out for you like what really makes sense.
Yeah, I think that every hour of every day could be different depending on how you look at it, but it also helps like having North Star to understand, okay, what's driving me, what is motivating me. That helps me prioritize what it is that I need to do. It also helps me let go of things that I can't control.
Yeah.
If there's just a tech issue or something that I personally can't control, right? I can't control that. And it allows me to just let go of that thing and move on without putting a ton of thought into it. So we may wear a lot of hats. We may have to change what we do on an hourly basis, but staying determined and focused on what it is that we're looking to do or change helps let some of those outside factors go.
Totally. And I think on the other hand, it's like you also need to figure out what you're good at and what you need to outsource. I think that's another really difficult thing for founders, initially is actually recognizing what you're not good at and acknowledging you can find better people, smarter people that can do that better than you. I think that was something that I had to learn. And then, I think one of the most important thing for a founder is to attract the right talent, to motivate them and to bring them on so they can actually make it so much better than you can. Like, for example, I had this vision of building this home merch platform, but I'm not technical. There was no way I could have done it myself, right? So I think the most important thing is while we first need to have buy-in from investors, get the money where we can afford getting really good people and convince them to quit their jobs, cushy, like well-paid big tech company jobs to join us and to build this together and make something amazing happen. Sounds like, like now we can summarize in a few sentences, but it definitely took a while to really get there, probably the first year even. And then it's about like, then the whole team and everything. So I think that was something I had to learn early on. It's like, where do I really focus my time? What is something that truly can't be replaced? Like, it have to be me. And what can we actually start having other people take on so I can stay more focused. And sometimes it's a phase, it's like now go to market, I'm building everything myself. It doesn't mean like a year later I should still be doing this. But I do think that it is important for founder to really figure out the playbook that works before you hire someone. And that's probably one of the biggest mistake I made is early on, I'm like, oh, I don't know how this works. I'm going to hire someone who has experience and they're going to figure it out. Never works like that because I don't know. It's like, even if they have experience, sometimes it's not tailored to what exactly you're building, and only you as a founder really know the vision of how things should be. So I do think that taking the time for every founder, for every single function, even if you're not good at it, for me, it's like, okay, product tech, I have no idea, but at the very least, high level, I need to understand how it works. Then I can evaluate who's the right person to actually execute on this, because there's many times I hired contractors or employees where I'm just like, roughly, this is something I want to solve. Roughly, they have this experience, bring them on, they're going to solve it. And it didn't end very well. So yeah, I think that's one of the lessons I learned. And also why I'm like, if we're go to market, especially as external facing, you don't want to bring in a salesperson who potentially could jeopardize a lot of the client relation down the road if they, actually do the wrong thing or wrong approach and people have a bad impression. Yeah.
There's two things in that I think that all founders will find super relatable. One, you're making mistakes, but you're making them often and quickly. The key is making them quickly and then learning from it. But it's also admitting that you can't do every job is so humbling, right?
Yeah.
And admitting that like you're not good at something is so humbling because you're like, oh yeah, I've got this. And then you start like getting down that road and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And it's a humbling just process to hand something off to somebody else and kind of relinquish a little bit of that control of what it is that you do. And in it's also gratifying to watch someone else pick up your idea, your vision, and sculpt it into something that's usable.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it's also just like a culture that, we try to cultivate is like be brutally honest, like cut the fluff, right? Like you have to really focus on what's right and what's good for the company, not about your own ego and how you look. Like I think there are plenty of times I'm like, okay, I think I screwed that up. It's my fault. And being able to own up to mistakes and move on to it and think about how to actually improve. I think that's something I really value and also that I really instill in our team. So, a lot of times if like people have big ego and they're like, oh, you have to listen to me, that kind of attitude, that's something I feel like is really unhealthy for startup early stage because honestly, every startup when you're starting off, you don't really know what you're doing. It's hard to know, right? And there's a lot of successful companies that aren't like, built with founders with this mindset, but like maybe they have enough capital to like just pay for the mistakes and all those like along the way. But I do think like it's probably healthier for the founder to be more open-minded and to get the feedback as well as a team to do the same.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So back to Wayo. So you guys are focused on swag and merch, really honing in kind of on like the tech startup organization. And you're partnering ideally with factories overseas. You've identified that there's a global supply chain issue, and it's really hard for most organizations. Say, like if I were to just go to like a not necessarily a print on demand one, but like one of those companies that do organizational merchandising, that there's inefficiencies in that supply chain, and therefore there's additional costs tagged on to that. So
Yeah.
you're helping bring those costs down and offering it back to the organizations on these products because they have a relatively unknown ROI, correct?
Yeah, so I would say the traditional process when we talk about promotional product industry, there are two channels, or actually maybe three channels people go with. There's a custom ink, Visa print, for imprint. Those are more closer to what we're doing because they do in bulk. Versus there's also the Printful that does like print on demand. But all those platforms, they all basically get the blanks from overseas factories. They store it here domestically. They have print shops domestically, and they use like domestic labor to do the actual decoration, adding the logo, adding a print on a product. So the problem is like, well, first they need to like store the inventory. That means they're not that flexible on bringing on new products. And also because now it's like all in the US and you're using US storage and labor and a machine and all that, the prices go up a lot more. So, and then also I think like in terms of like customization method and machines, like when you're straight out of the factory, I make it from scratch, they can do anything, right? Like you can do 360-degree print, like you can do like a embroidery that's like more 3D and like puffed. Whereas when you're using machines, a lot of times straight from US, like domestic, it's a little bit more limited just because of how the whole supply chain infrastructure is built. So when you go through that process, also there's multiple layers where people add margin, right? Because they're sourcing it from overseas. Usually they don't know the factories directly, and usually a lot of those companies don't really speak the language of the factory. So there's probably an agent involved. So that agent already marked up. And then they store it. And then now that they have cash flow issues, they market you even more. And then labor, everything. And then it's just like, that's why you're looking at a hat that, maybe we can source it for under $5 all in, deliver it also under 2 weeks. But on those platforms, they're going to sell it for 15 or sometimes even more. So that's kind of where we identified where the inefficiency is. And the core root problem is we haven't really figured out previously in what all those solutions, how to automate sourcing directly from factory shipped to you. And it could be like businesses globally, right? Sometimes it could even be individuals. Like if you're hosting a wedding and you're like, I just want to source some custom stuff for my wedding, as long as you can meet the few dozen unit minimum. So our minimum starts at 20 units for some of the items. On average, the minimums are all like 100 units. So as long as there's an event where it makes sense to order in bulk and you want something custom, then really we can help there. So that's kind of where we identified a problem from starting is like, okay, the domestic solutions they're there, but it's like not ideal. And then the second channels is like people go to distributors. So they're kind of like agencies, right? They're people who have some contacts and they're doing everything for you manually, which is great. You have a great service, but it's pretty slow. And also you're relying on one person. And if things goes wrong or if they don't have the contact, you're also still trying to figure out everything yourself. And because the person is doing it manually, they have to market even more to justify the hourly rate they're putting in. And then the third option is for you to go to Alibaba and then you go and try to find a factory directly. You're trying to negotiate and then figure out quality control, exporting, and all the logistics yourself, which I mean, it's doable and you probably can get the best pricing that way. But what if things goes wrong, right? You don't actually have a contract in place with an overseas factories. So like once they export the goods out, they could just ghost you. What are you going to do? Like, are you going to fly there and actually try to figure it out with a language barrier? You can sue them international law. So there's just not a lot of protection really from the customer's perspective. And also there is the risk of the product actually not looking the same quality as what's promised, right? There's a lot of like things that is very tricky. It's like you see this factory's profile online, everything's great, but it could be fake. Like you haven't actually been there. And the cost of someone to really navigate that and figure out if the factory's legit, if the quality is the best, top tier comparing to all of the other competitors in a space, that's a lot of investment. So essentially what we're trying to do is like, let's actually be the one who are doing the third approach where I just have a team on the ground and I'm already visiting hundreds of factories and vetting from dozens of factories for every single product category. So we're talking about stainless steel water bottle. I like literally personally went to this little village in China that makes all the stainless steel water bottles. There's hundreds of factories, if not more, and they all make the same kind of bottles. So online, it's impossible to tell the difference. But when you actually do due diligence into the actual like factory's background and visit it on site and see the product in hand and compare them side by side, you know which one is actually so much better. And we would test with the factory placing like a test order to see how they operate. So basically we did all the vetting for the clients. And then once we already determined the best factory to go with, we then digitize our products. So anyone can now in our front end, when they go into design studio, easily access all those products, design it, they see the effect, they see the auto quotation because we've done the hard work of already, basically collecting all the data and then presenting it in a very user-friendly way. And it's dynamic. You make the logo bigger or smaller, the price will update. You change it from embroidery to heat transfer, the pricing will change, and etc.
That was a lot. What in that process made you realize that AI could fundamentally change how this is done?
Yeah. So I think traditional manufacturing industry, where it really takes up the most time when you're doing a custom project is the communication. So because of the language barrier, the time zone difference, and a lot of times the clients are not professionals either. They'll come to you with an idea and they're like, oh, I want to source this for an event. Here's like what I want. They're missing all the details. What is the quantity? What is the material, right? All that. And then you're spending time asking the same questions back and then getting the answers. And then you need to like organize that into like an Excel or a PDF or whatever, and then translate that to send to the factory. And then a factory gets it, but then, like they're also human. They don't have a system in place that well. Most of the factories are not super tech savvy in terms of like timeline, like reminders and all that. So all of that, if you're doing it manually through an agent, like someone needs to remember that and track that manually. So we were like at the very, least in the first place, we got to just automate this process. So from inquiry to actually getting the design ready, getting the quotes and placing orders, how can we actually automate that? And that comes down to two solutions. One is, well, we build out a database and then we have all those products out there and we have the design studio now on thewayo.com where people already can interact and get the information from design to quotes right away. So that already eliminates a lot of the back and forth because when they think it's good, they're going to check out, it's already paid for. It's not like you're waiting for a quote 100 emails later and someone uploading, actually it'll be someone sending you their logo in email and telling you, oh, place it here, but actually move it up by 1 inch, move it down by half an inch, like that kind of process is what's really like is inefficient. And then when it goes into the factory side is also like once the order is placed, we already have a very consolidated file auto-translated into the factory's language, and they can see the actual order and just go to production right away. The factory doesn't have to waste time double checking or trying to get their bilingual customer service person to confirm details. That's also where the factory would waste a lot of resource because the bilingual people are also more expensive for them. So the factory literally can just like go into production. Once it's done, we will take care of everything from there for them. And then the other part is like the fully custom projects. So those are traditionally the the more manual side, where it's like someone has an idea, they're like, I have this idea of making a plushie a very specific way. And those kind of things is like back and forth communication. And we can't really automate that through our catalog because it's not a catalog product. So that's where we built into AI product sourcing agent, where it can take in all the requests, it can ask questions, provide information. Sometimes also need education because clients don't really know what's the difference between cotton or polyester cotton, whatever. So that's where the AI sourcing agent will come in. And what we're building next is like a designer tool, merch line generator, where someone can just come in and say, here's my website, here's my event, the use case and budget. And then we'll basically fetch a logo and a design, a brand guide, and then come up with some kind of image design to put it already on the recommended products. And we recommend a product accordingly. And everything is still editable. So they already come up with like a draft for them to work with. And I think that's what a lot of our, clients requested, especially if the founder doesn't have a design background. And maybe the team is too small, they don't have a designer on staff to do this. So making it even more accessible, I think, through a lot of the tools that we're building.
That seems to have started to be a trend, right? Giving other organizations just a starting off point versus a blank slate. So being able to provide, here's this brand look based off of what it is that you're looking to do and your budget and your logos. Like, I think it's great because it really kind of takes away the ambiguity of starting with just a blank page. So that'll be really cool. And that's rolled out. So my next question for you is, how have the political policies impacted how you're doing business, or how do you project those impacting how you do business?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? We're definitely affected, but I think we're finding ways to navigate. And part of it is also expanding more globally sooner than we expected. So I'm actually going to be in Europe this summer. We're trying to open up the European market and going to Canadian market while we kind of wait for things to, settle down. But we've also figured out ways where we, some of them we have to absorb and just lower our margin. And then some we have to increase our price a little bit to make it still work. But I think luckily we do bulk shipments, at least not drop ship. I think drop ship is really, really hard given all the minimum fees they're charging. So there's still ways for us to navigate. And the crazy thing is still, even with the tariff, our products are still very competitive. And comparing to most of the other platforms we mentioned, we're still going to be a lot cheaper. So I think it's a matter of how much cheaper, but at least in the meantime, we can still be competitive in that sense. And I think more importantly, it's we can make the products that other people can't, right? Aside from prices, it's just about the capability of actually making high quality stuff that's super custom. All of the other competitors in space, they just simply can't do that, and still providing the seamless and a very automated experience. So I still think fundamentally, despite all the different kind of policy temporary changes, it still comes down to who can make the best product at the cheapest price or relatively cheaper price, and then actually provide the service that people want. And I don't think that's going away despite what's happening in the world. So I think we're also just trying to block out a lot of noise and focus on building what we're really good at and just help the clients actually achieve what they want.
That makes complete sense. So, Julia, you've been great. At the end of each one of my podcast episodes, I give all of my guests 90 seconds to plug anything that they're passionate about. So this could be Wayo, this could be mentorship, this could be how to seek funding as an organization. So without further ado, the next 90 seconds belong to you.
Wow. Okay. Well, I think I'll probably focus on some of the our pitch first, and then also what I can potentially give, right? So definitely, if you are a founder or if you're an event organizer or anyone who really just looking for custom products, you can go to thewayo.com and then you can browse hundreds of products on our catalog. And every week we're adding new items on there. Or if you just have ideas, you're I want to make something custom. We have the AI sourcing agent live already, but a lot of cool products coming soon. I mean, AI products coming soon to make the whole experience a lot simpler. So any ideas you can share with us and we'll go ahead and make it happen. On the other hand, I'm a founder and I love to connect with other people in this space. So if you ever need help, advice in terms of team building, fundraising, would love to also just jam on go-to-market strategies, stuff like that, would be more than happy to help. And just wanted to also thank you for having me here and to hear about the whole experience. Very grateful for that, and been a pleasure.
Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks so much.